There's a special kind of fear that comes from being awake when everyone else isn't. When it's just you, the silence, and whatever the dark decides to hide in it. Welcome to Night Encounters. Tonight, we'll step into the lives of those tasked with watching over empty places, security guards who have witnessed what the rest of us are never meant to see. These are allegedly true accounts. Story 1, The Late Shift at Ridgepoint Mall by Davis. This happened in late 2018. I was working the graveyard shift as a security guard at Ridgepoint Mall, a mid-size complex about 20 minutes outside my hometown. I'd been on night duty for almost a year, and I'd gotten used to the strange quiet that comes after midnight. Most nights were uneventful. I'd patrol the hallways, check shop locks, and sip bad coffee in the control room while watching camera feeds. Mall security was more about chasing off kids or dealing with faulty alarms than anything serious. That night felt stiller than usual. You know how silence itself can feel heavy? That's what it was like even the hum of the air conditioning was too quiet. It started around 2:15 a.m. I was doing my second patrol loop when I passed by a clothing store near the north entrance. The display lights flickered, nothing major, just a soft pulse. I made a mental note to report it, but as I walked by, I caught sight of something on the other side of the glass. At first, it looked like a mannequin that had been moved. But something about its position seemed wrong. It was turned facing outward, right toward the hallway. I remember thinking I'd walked by that store an hour ago, and that mannequin hadn't been there. I even went back to the feed once I returned to the control room and checked. Nothing. Empty display window. But now? There it stood. The flickering continued, so I figured I'd go check it out in person. I keyed into the store, flashlight in hand. Inside, everything was still except for the hum of the lights. The mannequin was positioned right at the center of the room. It was just an older male mannequin, dressed in a store uniform. I almost laughed at myself. Paranoia from too much caffeine, probably. Then I noticed something. Its feet were covered in a thin layer of dust, except for fresh footprints leading up to the spot it now stood. I froze. There were no other footprints leading away. That was when the security radio cracked to life, loud in the silence. My partner on the other side of the building said, "You checking the north wing?" Because camera 14 just went offline. Camera 14 was aimed directly at the store I was standing in. My heart dropped. I backed toward the door, light trembling in my hand. Then, quiet. A faint shuffle came from the dressing room at the back. It wasn't loud, but enough for my stomach to twist. "Anyone in there?" I called out, trying to sound authoritative, but my voice cracked. No answer. I stood frozen for several seconds, then turned and left the store fast, locking it behind me. When I reached the control room, I rewound the camera just before it went out. You can see me entering the store. And behind me, a shape moves from the dressing room. Someone was in there, and they were watching me the whole time. Police came and searched, but found no one. No forced entry, no tampering. The cameras came back online 2 hours later, perfectly fine. When I quit a month later, I told my replacement to keep an eye on camera 14. He laughed. A week later, he filed a report. Someone had left a note taped to that same display window. It just said, "I waited." Story 2, The Construction Yard Watched by Miles. In 2021, I worked night security at an unfinished high-rise downtown. It was part of a new development, 10 floors up with scaffolding everywhere and barely any lighting. My shifts were long and cold, usually from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. The only light came from a portable lamp near the site entrance and whatever spilled from the streetlights 2 blocks over. It wasn't uncommon to hear rats, distant traffic, or the occasional stray dog moving around. That night, though, it was dead quiet. Not even the wind between the rebar. Around 1 a.m., I heard metal clanging from somewhere up on the 4th floor. The sound was rhythmic, like someone slowly dragging a pipe. I remember looking up and seeing a faint flashlight beam sweep past a window opening. Workers weren't supposed to be there after hours. I radioed it into my supervisor, but the line kept cutting out. I thought it might just be a homeless person sheltering in. So I went to check. The stairway echoed with every step I took, the beam of my flashlight catching concrete dust in the air. When I reached the 4th floor, the temperature felt noticeably colder. I called out, "Security! Is someone up here?" Nothing. But from the far end, a single tapping sound answered, 3 knocks against metal. I walked slowly toward it, scanning every unfinished doorway. Halfway there, I noticed wet footprints, bare feet. They led from a puddle near the window line straight into the darkness ahead. I followed them, telling myself maybe some vagrant had gotten wet in the rain earlier. Then, I realized the footprint stopped halfway to the other side, but there was no puddle, no place to hide, nothing. Just empty air, open to the city below. That's when I heard movement behind me. Quick and deliberate, like heavy boots on concrete. I spun, flashlight shaking, nothing but exposed beams. But the beam caught something low to the ground, a bag. My head cleared for a second, I approached and nudged it open with the flashlight. Inside were work gloves, a thermos, and a small pair of bolt cutters. All of it freshly used. Then, in the periphery, I saw someone standing on the floor above, just their shadow, leaning over the edge of the shaft, watching me. I shouted and ran toward the stairwell, but by the time I got there, the shadow was gone. When the day crew came in a few hours later, one of the contractors pulled me aside. He said the same tools had been stolen from another site 2 weeks prior, around the same time another guard had been assaulted by someone pretending to be a worker. I gave my resignation that day. The police never identified the man, though they said similar thefts kept happening all summer. Sometimes, when I drive past the new skyscraper, I still glance at the windows, half expecting to see that figure watching from above. Story 3, Overnight at the Storage Facility, by Roland. This story took place in early 2020, back when I worked at a 24-hour self-storage facility about 15 minutes outside the city. It wasn't the kind of job most people linger in, hours of silence broken up by the occasional client needing to access their unit after dark. Our building had 3 long corridors of units, plus a back section that was being renovated. My post sat in a small glass room beside the entry gate, with monitors showing every camera feed. Nights all felt the same. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the soft buzz of cicadas outside, and the clanking of metal when the wind blew through the loading area. But one night, everything felt different. Silent in a way I hadn't heard before, like the entire property was holding its breath. Around midnight, the cameras glitched. Just a flicker, a momentary static in hallway 2. Normally, power surges caused similar issues, but the rest of the building stayed on perfectly fine. So, I checked the feed again and noticed something strange. One of the unit doors, number 47, was slightly ajar. I was sure I'd locked all of them earlier during routine inspection. The customer hadn't visited for weeks. I radioed the on-call supervisor. No answer. Then I tried the intercom to the back gate, also dead. That's when the unease sank in. It wasn't a technical problem. Someone was moving around out there. I grabbed my flashlight and walked down corridor 2. Every footstep echoed off the metal doors. Each unit has a tiny latch light that reflects even the softest beam, so every row sparkled faintly. The air felt colder than it should. My heart sped up as I got closer to Unit 47. It was barely open, the padlock still dangling unlocked. I knocked on the door frame. Security checking the premises. Anyone here? Silence. But behind that silence, something scraped. Not loud, but distinct. Like cardboard being shifted deliberately. I pushed the door open slowly. The unit was filled with boxes stacked almost to the ceiling, all but one area cleared in the center. A single folding chair sat there, facing the back wall. I felt my skin crawl. The floor was swept unnaturally clean, like someone had prepared that spot. Then came the sound again, this time from 2 units over. Quick shuffling. I spun around, swept the light down the corridor, and for a split second I thought I saw a silhouette dash behind a corner. I backed away and called into the radio again, voice shaking. Still nothing. The facility felt sealed off, even though I knew every door was unlocked. When I reached the corner, I aimed the flashlight ahead. It caught movement, a hand retreating slowly into the darkness near the maintenance door. I shouted, heart pounding, telling whoever it was to come out. A man stepped into view. He wore a gray hoodie, face obscured, both hands raised. "Didn't mean to scare you," he said quietly. "I was just looking for my unit." But something felt terribly off. There was no key in his hand. And the unit number he mentioned didn't even exist, it belonged to the new section still under construction. I told him to wait while I called my supervisor. He nodded, hand still raised. I took half a step back toward the office, and the moment I broke eye contact, I heard him move. Fast. Footsteps slapping against concrete. I turned and sprinted, almost slipping as I ran the length of the corridor. I could hear him behind me, the echo of shoes hitting metal doors as he brushed past. I made it into the glass office and slammed the door shut, fumbling for the emergency lock switch. My hand shook so badly that it took 3 tries to hit it. He reached the office window seconds later. For a brief instant, his face hovered in the reflection, thin, expressionless, eyes staring through me. Then he turned and stepped back into the shadows of the corridor, until he vanished from the camera's view. The police came 15 minutes later. They never found him. However, when they reviewed the security logs, they noticed something unusual. The name he gave matched a rental record from 3 years earlier. The same unit number he'd said, except that part of the building hadn't even existed back then. After that, I asked to be reassigned to day shifts. Even now, when I lock my front door at night, I sometimes imagine that man standing just beyond the glass, waiting for me to look away again. Story 4: The Empty Hospital Wing by L.M. Back in 2017, I worked as a nighttime security guard at a mid-sized hospital outside Austin. My main task was to patrol the older East Wing, the part they kept closed off after it was decommissioned for safety upgrades. The wing hadn't been used in years except for storage, though it still had that faint sterile smell of hospitals. Most nights, my rounds were quiet. I'd walk through dim hallways, hearing only the buzz of the fluorescent lights and the hum of maintenance equipment behind the walls. The emptiness never bothered me before, or if anything, it was peaceful. That night changed that. It started when the power flickered just after 2 a.m. The main lights went out for a second, and when they came back on, one emergency exit alarm near the old pediatric ward started blinking even though it wasn't armed. I decided to check it out. The old part of the wing had a long corridor with units on each side, the kind where sound travels strangely, like footsteps echo long after they stop. When I reached the door, the alarm light was still flashing. But what made me stop was the sound from inside the locked ward. Someone was humming. A single low tune, slow and deliberate, like a lullaby. I froze, flashlight still. I thought maybe a maintenance worker had wandered in earlier and gotten locked inside, but no one else was scheduled that night. Security, is anyone in there? I called out. The humming stopped. Then, faintly from the other end of the hall, came a soft knock. Not on the door I was checking, but one about 30 feet behind me. It sounded almost polite. 3 slow taps. I turned fast, shining my light toward the end of the hall. Nothing. Empty air, pale green walls, a few stacked boxes in the corner. I started backing toward the exit, every instinct screaming to leave. The intercom buzzed on my shoulder suddenly, nearly making me jump. It was Central Security. The guard on duty said, "You're in East Wing, right?" Because motion sensors down there just triggered multiple zones. He paused a second. "But you're the only one signed in." I forced myself to walk down the hallway. My flashlight beam caught one of the patient rooms near the end. The door was halfway open, and through the window, I thought I saw a shadow move inside. "So, I need to see your ID," I shouted. My voice echoed off the tile. No response. I pushed in. The room was empty, mostly. The lights barely flickered on. In the far corner stood an old hospital bed with a curtain drawn halfway. On the floor beneath the bed, I saw something, a hospital ID badge. I crouched to pick it up. The name was faded, but I could still read the date, March 2013. When I looked up, the curtain had moved. Just a little. Enough for me to see the faint outline of legs behind it. I didn't even check. I bolted from the room, sprinted down the corridor, and slammed through the exit door, which set off the alarm again at full volume. By the time backup arrived, the entire wing was empty. The other guards checked room by room. No one was inside, no signs of forced entry, nothing missing. But when they checked the surveillance footage for that hour, something didn't sit right. The hallway camera showed me entering the pediatric wing. Just before I turned toward the door, another shape crossed behind me, slow, tall, almost gliding. Then it vanished the moment the lights flickered back on. No one could explain it. They told me it was probably a trick of light on the reflective floors. I was transferred out of that wing the next day. Even now, sometimes, when I hear that kind of humming, low and tuneless, I feel my stomach drop. because that same sound had no business echoing through an abandoned hospital. Story 5: The Warehouse Near the Docks by Theo. This story happened in 2022, when I picked up extra security work at a shipping warehouse by the docks. I was only supposed to cover 3 night shifts while the regular guard was out sick. The place was old, half the lights didn't work, and only one corridor camera functioned properly. But it paid double for the overnight hours, and I needed the money. My job was simple: make hourly rounds, log them on paper, and check the gates. The first 2 nights were fine. But on the third one, the air felt heavy, humid from the nearby ocean. And the silence hit me immediately as I stepped out of the guard shack. It wasn't peace, it was the sort of stillness that gnaws at you. Near 1:30 a.m., I noticed the gate sensor flashing red on the panel. The outer gate was still locked according to the cameras, but the motion detector said something had moved out there. I checked the live feed. Nothing but shadows from the dock lights. Then a second motion alert went off, this time inside the warehouse itself. That wasn't supposed to happen unless someone had keyed in. I grabbed my flashlight and phone, heading inward. The metal door groaned open, and cool air rushed out from the dark space. The smell of dust and grease was thick. As I moved deeper inside, the echo of my own steps bounced off the steel racks. I clicked on the switch for the overhead lights, only half turned on. Something shifted to my right. I snapped the light in that direction. A cargo torp lay partly rolled off a crate, as if someone had brushed past it moments earlier. I told myself it was wind from the open door. Except that door was now swinging closed behind me, slowly. I rushed forward and caught it with one hand before it latched. I didn't want to get trapped in there. Then, somewhere from the back aisles, came a dragging sound. Not loud, just long and drawn out, like heavy canvas being pulled across concrete. My voice cracked a bit when I called out, "Who's back there? You need to show yourself." The noise stopped. Silence pressed in again. I followed the sound down one narrow aisle. Halfway through, I saw movement between 2 stacks of boxes, a shadow ducking behind cover. When I reached the space, I didn't find a person, but a small office chair, turned toward the shadows. Someone had been sitting there recently, the seat still spun slightly when I touched it. That's when I heard the footsteps start again, behind me this time. Quick, deliberate, getting faster. I turned my flashlight, and at the far end of the aisle, there was someone crouched, eyes just barely catching the light's reflection. He stood up slowly, body stiff, no expression. "Stay where you are," I said. My voice was shaking now. "I'm calling the police." He didn't move. Then the light above us flickered, and when it came back on, he was gone. I bolted for the exit, every sound amplified, my breathing, the thuds of my boots, the hum of the lights overhead. When I burst outside, I locked the door and ran to the guard shack. I called my supervisor. He told me to stay inside until police arrived. When they did, they checked the building and found fresh footprints leading to one of the loading bay windows. The latch had been pried open from the outside. They said it was probably just a thief looking for copper or parts to steal. Maybe. But when they reviewed the footage later, they found something odd. About 20 minutes before I entered the building, the interior camera caught that same gate sensor flashing red. And for a brief moment, a figure stood by the dock fence, facing the camera directly. The timestamp showed he waited there for over 10 minutes before moving out of frame. I stopped taking dock shifts after that. Sometimes, I still drive past that warehouse on my way to work. The outer gate always looks slightly ajar, even when it's supposedly locked for the night. Some places are never truly empty, not if you know how to listen. Whether it's the echo of footsteps, the flicker of a shadow, or the feeling that you're not as alone as you'd hoped, the night keeps its own kinds of secrets. For the people who keep watch while the rest of us sleep, those moments are impossible to forget. If you have a true, original story you'd like to share and see featured on this channel, please send your encounters to nightencountersstories@gmail.com. We read every message, and your story could be the next that keeps someone up at night. Thank you for joining us here on Night Encounters. Until next time, be careful out there and trust your instincts.